Hey Nate, how you doing?
Hey Richard, how's it going?
Yeah, good, good. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Good. Are you guys still traveling around a bit? I think last time we spoke, you were on your way to, I think it was SpaceCom in Florida.
Yeah, I just got back from DC yesterday. Might have to go
Yeah,
back to DC next week. So, March is it's basically March. March is a busy month.
yeah, yeah. Are you guys
Uh,
gearing up for the event circuit, heading to Satellite in DC, I imagine, and
exactly. And then
Colorado after
symposium.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then I have some customers coming out and then end of March and stuff. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Do you guys get out to the small sat in Utah? And I think
Um,
it's July or August. August.
yes, we are sponsoring and have a booth. So we'll see how fun, how different Salt Lake
Yeah.
City actually is versus Logan.
Yeah, yeah. I was literally having this conversation with the last guest on Logan and small sat and that whole deal. I think a lot of people, although it's kind of from a sentimental perspective, sad to see it go from Logan because it's been there for
Yeah,
so long, and it's an awesome event. It's one of my favorites over the calendar. I
yeah.
absolutely love the small sat, but I think it's easier. It's so much easier for travel, booking hotels,
Oh my
accommodation,
gosh.
being in Salt Lake.
Hotels, I'm telling you, so much better. Professionals don't have to stay in a dorm,
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's kind of nice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the amount of ice-breaking conversation you have at small sat about people staying in hotels and dorms and stuff is hilarious. So yeah, looking forward to that one.
Kudos to Logan and stuff for being able to support that somehow, some way.
Yeah,
They got intuitive, yeah.
yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. I guess we can kick things off, take us back to the early days of Nate, if you would talk us through where you started in life, where you grew up, that sort of thing, school, college, and eventually how you made your way in your earlier career into Lockheed and how you kind of made that whole transition into the space sector.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely hasn't been a straight line. So,
Yeah.
ever since I was probably 7 years old, I actually always wanted to be a tornado chaser and a hurricane chaser. So, I wanted to be, for all intents and purposes, a meteorologist. And so, I had my sights set on that all the way through senior year of high school. Got into the University of Michigan, and when I was there, Michigan's very big in research. And so one of the programs that I was a part of, they kind of required you to do research. And so when I was looking through the book of all the amazing research activities that U of M has, I came across a program that was doing weather balloons. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like I thought I'd have to be on
Yeah.
TV and don't necessarily want to be on TV. Like I literally want to be next to a tornado or in the middle of a hurricane. So I was like, this will make my mom sleep better at night if I'm just launching weather balloons.
Yeah.
And so I joined that, and literally the first like meeting that we're having, they're talking about how they're launching these little CubeSats on balloons, and the balloon's going to pop, and they're going to retrieve these CubeSats, fix them, and then finally they're going to launch them into space one day when everything works. And so I found out that it was actually a test bed for small satellites. And the other program that they were working on, because this comes full circle, was Google has an office in Ann Arbor. And so before Google Loon existed, which Google Loon ended up doing internet through high altitude balloons, they
Yeah.
were doing a trade study with U of M about, do we do internet from satellites, from UAVs, from balloons, from the ground? Like, how do we help disaster relief via internet? And so those were like two of the projects that I was working on during the time there. And since I was a meteorologist, they were like, well, you can predict where this balloon will pop because of all the atmospheric models that we have available to us. And as I was kind of like learning about, the physics of, the trajectory of these balloons, I was like, these are models that are old. Like we're going to need real-time data. And so I was like, if we can, stream down the weather, the temperature, the humidity, just the altitude live, we can update the predictions. And so that was kind of like a forcing function to learning hardware and software,
Yeah.
because they didn't have anyone to really focus on that aspect of it. So I ended up learning, how to use an Arduino, how to use Zigbees, how to use MSP430s and embedded systems, how to route electronics with LTM, how to spin PCBs, and ultimately was able to, help kind of stream telemetry down. So that kind of started getting me thinking. I was like, this is actually really fun. So I was like, I actually really like doing this. This satellite thing might be for me. And so I ended up getting my master's there as well. During that time, I was applying for a bunch of jobs and ended up getting a job at my dream at the time, Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
And so because of my hands-on activity, they were like, okay, well, you can be an electrical test engineer. You can work on $1 billion satellite, and the satellite's called MUOS. And MUOS was providing 3G communications for the warfighter. MUOS, when I joined, it was in 2013. The program idea came about in 1999 because I was like, why are we using 3G? Like, we're using 4G, 5G. We're talking about internet
Yeah.
through balloons. Like, 3G was so like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And when I was talking to PMO, they were walking me through like the government procurement cycle and how and appropriations and kind of like the government hammer,
Yeah.
and how much it costs. And I was like, wow, that's a long time. Like, there's got to be a way that we can do this faster. Lo and behold, one of my good friends called me, one of the project managers that I was working at the balloon research project in Michigan, and he was like, "Hey, I'm moving out to San Francisco. I'll be close to you. I'm going to be working out of a garage and working at this startup that came out of Google. It's called OneWeb, and we're going to be beaming internet from satellites. So let's kind of finish what we started
Yeah.
and see if we can provide internet for education, for disaster relief." And he's like, the only catch is we have to launch 600 plus satellites. I think at the time actually it was like 1,500 satellites was the goal. I was like, oh, for sure. Like, I loved the idea. I think it's amazing, especially if you can change people's lives, whether it's, in the moment where they don't have connectivity and need to reach a loved one or emergency services, or when, you don't have access to education and you can literally the next like Einstein is out there, but they just don't
Yeah.
have access to the World Wide Web that we all take for granted. And so that's what got me into the OneWeb saga post Lockheed Martin, where I was able to lead some of the command and control efforts there for connecting, dozens of ground antennas to hundreds and hundreds of satellites.
Nice. Did you ever make that going back earlier when you were talking about chasing the tornadoes and wanting to be a meteorologist? Did you ever make that link that you would end up in space? Did you ever make that link at the time? And go, oh, I could maybe apply what I've learned here to the space industry, or was it something that you kind
Yes.
of learned along the way?
So during my college career and stuff, like I went tornado chasing. Before that, I was literally like Bill Paxton in Twister, where I hooked onto another research project, and
Yeah.
I was basically creating these like maple seeds and like small sensors, and basically we were going to toss them up into a tornado and get back all the live telemetry and stuff. So I was taking the stuff that I was working with on the balloon side, but then like how can I actually apply this to storm chasing? And there's companies out there now that are doing like weather satellites, and making sure that we can get more enhanced models by data fusion, because airplanes, weather balloons, atmospheric models, satellite imagery, all of this goes into the weather models that we use today. So it was still holding true, and I was like, I can still kind of do everything that I really enjoy, but it
Yeah.
was awesome to see the connection.
Awesome. And how did Quindar happen? Talk us through. I'd like to hear about what Quindar do and what you specialize in, how you fit into the ecosystem. But how did that founder story unfold? How did Quindar happen?
Yeah, so Quindar is a very rare team. We have 6 co-founders. That's
Yeah.
very rare, um, and all of us met basically within the first couple months at OneWeb, and so each of us was leading development in the flight dynamics, where satellites are going, how we're going to get there, mission planning, how do I leveraged only a handful of antennas, dozens of antennas really, with hundreds of satellites without playing favorites. But then also there's anomalies. So how do you make sure that you talk to the satellite sooner that has an anomaly versus ones that are doing okay? I was leading the command and control segment. So how do we actually speak with the satellite through those antennas? Another founder of ours was doing engineering analytics. So, basically one person can only handle about like 7 problems at a time before they start to, I would say, overheat a little bit on the tasks
Yeah.
that they're working on. And people can probably think about this in their day-to-day lives of, you can only have so many tasks before it's just you start not focusing on others.
Yeah.
And then the infrastructure. So another founder came and he was doing a lot of the infrastructure, DevOps, really just kind of an amazing utility person. And in 2020, OneWeb went into Chapter 11, and there was mass layoffs, and so a lot of us were laid off immediately. It was an amazing company, an amazing time. The team was awesome, and that bond stuck, and we ended up going to another company together called Orbital Effects, and they had the same problem. They're like, "Hey, we need a ground system. We launched in 9 months. You guys helped build the OneWeb one. Can you build us one from scratch here?" And so we were like, absolutely. We took a lot of experience, and we're like, okay, this is what we can do to get to market faster in 9 months, which is really unheard of in 2020. And let's leverage the cloud. And so when we were there, all the founders, of Quindar today worked at Orbital Effects, and all of our industry that had friends and colleagues had spread across the industry, and so everyone was calling. They're like the same problem. They're like, hey, like, what are you guys doing for mission operations? Everyone has to build mission operations, and that was kind of like the first signal. And we were like, wait a second, like everyone's building this in-house, and
Yeah.
I'm like, this is our second time building this. Is this what I want to do my entire career? How do I get back to tornado chasing? And so we kind of just looked at each other and we're like, guys, I think there is something here. People didn't start their company for the mission operations. Like, imagine going to a founder and saying, hey, there's a utility just like AWS that you don't have to stand up your own infrastructure and servers. You don't have to manage and hire those people. Like, go and buy another satellite instead of what you would have done 10 years ago. Use
Yeah.
all of that funding and buy another satellite, or create a couple more extra payloads. Get your money back essentially. And so that's where the idea kind of started from, is like, let's save the founders of other companies from having to create this and having them focus on the day one. Why are they starting this company? High resolution imagery, direct satellite to cell phone service, crosslinks and telecom, and then like an outer net for space. Whatever the idea is, let's keep them focused there, because for startups, time and money is everything. For enterprises, it's uptime. And so it's like, for the enterprise folks is, how can we provide an SLA, 99% SLA, that the service is up and running, so that when a satellite is connecting to a cell phone, and that cell phone happens to be in like the Maui fire tragedy, make sure that person can call home. Make sure that satellite's not down because it's in a safe mode, or something happened. But let's make sure that that person can connect at the end of the line. And let's lead an industry first SLA on the uptime, just as AWS does on the ground infrastructure, just as your ISP does, for your internet provider. That let's do that for space. Let's keep those flying servers in space up and running. And that was like the early ideation of Quindar. There's definitely been a lot of amazing signals that we've picked up along the way that I'm happy to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please do. How has Quindar evolved? Where do you see it evolving in line with what you've just mentioned there? And the general industry as well. I know it's a very broad term, space as a service, but it seems to be keep on growing, and the capacity and the capabilities from space as a service seem to be infinite. So how do you see that whole industry evolving, and what role do you see Quindar playing in that in the future?
Yeah, so our vision is that satellites are flying servers in space. And so just as AWS or Azure is managing Dell, Lenovo, HP form factor servers, and then on those servers there's operating software, there's Windows, there's Linux, there's so many different flavors of Linux. And then there's the data centers that those servers are sitting at, and the ISPs, that connect. And in the end, that makes this call work, right? Like the creator of Teams, of Zoom, like they're focused on, how do I stream video from one end to the other, or have multiple people, join a video call. They're not as interested in the servers. The servers obviously are there to as a means to an end to make this product work. That's our vision in space, is those servers are satellites. There's different manufacturers that create those satellites. They all act differently. Then there's the operating software. There's definitely some common operating software, but there's so many different flavors. There's derivatives. There's different ways to use them. There's different, data centers that you would in space, in the sense of like, how do you have high availability for your customer, multiple satellites? And then there's the ISP, which is the antenna provider. How do you get access to your satellite? And in the end, just as AWS and Azure and GCP keeps servers up and running so people can put their applications on it, that's what Quindar is doing. Quindar is just keeping satellites healthy, up and running, so that you can always connect to it. What we're doing is we're creating a network where you can connect to those satellites. If something in that network goes down, we'll find another antenna. So we're trying to make sure that we can proliferate your route to space and find your route to space without you having to say, why can't I talk to my satellite? Or like, how do I talk to my satellite? When can I talk to my satellite? With the access to 392 potential antennas that we provide for our customers, we should be able to have this like virtual mesh network where we can always find your route. You shouldn't care about what antenna you're necessarily going through. You should care about that you can access your asset maybe at a certain time or at a much longer period of time than traditional like LEO birds or GEO birds. The second part about that is in one system, it shouldn't be multiple systems. And so if you have multiple manufacturers in your constellation, which happens a lot in the government and a lot more in commercial because of supply chain issues, and then also if you have a legacy system, you're trying to create a new system, if you're trying to do operations, the human operations as a service, it should be one system that is showing all of these nodes in space. So just as Datadog can show you what's the status of your ISP, what are the servers that you're using, what's the latency, like that's where we start to reach out to, is that's what operators really care about, is do I have a strong link? Is there connection to my satellite? Are there issues on the ground? Are there issues on my satellite? That's what they really care about. The automation behind it of, I need to upload a schedule, I need to pet a watchdog to make sure that the satellite doesn't go into sun safe in 12 hours because I haven't spoken to it. Like all of those are daily routines and they should remain daily routines. But if anything happens, is there's automation to return from sun safe mode into normal mode, and to make sure that you can always have your mission. And so, we have this to where one of our customers is flying a payload on another customers of ours, a manufacturer, and they were able to access their payload securely, send a task without affecting the bus operations, without touching and having access to any of the other payloads that were on board that satellite. And so the industry finally has a fishbowl into payload as a service, versus traditionally what happens is the manufacturers will fly. You'll probably have like an email that the customer will send saying, hey, can you do this? Email's slow. Like we all know that. Like if you're trying to get in contact with someone, pick up a phone. Honestly, even use like Slack or Teams is usually even faster than that. Email is like the third slowest. Beyond that, it's probably sending a letter. So is that really modern day, like what we want to be doing for satellite operations? And then on the defense side is you can't have that, especially in times of military alert readiness when it's elevated, is you can't be sending emails to different agencies. You have to have consolidated information. So that's what we're providing some of our customers, is the ability to securely task their payload without affecting bus operations. So they're in control of their payload, and the bus and the other payloads are still restricted.
Nice, perfect. And I guess to break that down in like real layman's terms, how does Quindar keep that link secure? How do they make it that is like an unbreakable link and there aren't those issues, and you're providing that kind of, I guess, a full stack solution because of all the procurement issues that you said? How are you going about that in simple terms? How do you make it so that link does not break?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple layers to it. The first one is the foundation, which is information assurance, compliance, security, cybersecurity is built into culture. So week one, when we had no money, it was literally the founders putting their own money into the company. we invested in security, compliance, and cyber. Like no startups really do that. They're like, hey, we got to work really fast. Like that's going to get in the way. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
But what we did was we built it into our culture, because when you're a payload customer accessing a satellite, you need to make sure that you can't touch any of the other payloads. The bus manufacturer wants to make sure they can't touch any other payloads. They want to make sure that they can't maneuver the satellite or send the wrong command. Like they have to have those types of restrictions. And so part of that is just making sure that the security and compliance and the foundation is built into the culture, so that as we build out the product, we're always focusing on that. So that when we're creating new services, we understand multi-tenant, single tenancy. Basically, do I have multiple customers living in the same account, or do I separate them out? So really, that's where we start talking about like even data residency and what touches. All of that really flows down to is, what's the security and compliance of the customer that we can work with. The second part is the architecture, and what the team has built here is like, it's the secret sauce. It's how we're able to be so flexible. And to tell that in a story is, we heard about this like payload as a service opportunity, I would say a year and a half or so after starting the company. And I was like, okay, I think we have something that we can do this. Like we didn't start off saying, hey, we're going to be able to do payload as a service, but I was like, I think we can do this. Like the architecture that we built allows us to restrict that access. And the team was like, yeah, absolutely. We'll, create them a portal is what we called it, and they'll have access only to their asset. And so within a month, we just tuned some things up. That's all we did, was we just like tuned some things up. We were able to create that product because that's the team's velocity is very high, and provide that to our customer, test it with the manufacturer, and it worked. And so it's that open architecture that we're able to connect to different antenna providers, that we're able to restrict certain data sets, and that now is leading us into, how can manufacturers, and they can use Quindar to do LEOP, like the first, couple days, months, just depends on how long their LEOP is, and then hand off the satellite to their customer. If their customers using Quindar or not using Quindar, how can their customer then say, hey, there's an anomaly, or hey, there's a complicated flight software, I want that new version. Can you please upload it? It's a complicated procedure. I'm going to pass this back. So think about your Tesla, or a Tesla. I don't know if you have a Tesla, but a Tesla. What happens is when you need an update for hardware, you're getting, a new, your window cracked, your windshield cracked, and they're going to put you in a new windshield. When you go to the dealership, you go through a set of prompts, and then you can no longer access your car. And so you can't move it, you can't open the doors, you can't turn the stereo on, none of that. The dealer now has control. And so they're able to fix it. And then when they're done, they pass it back to you, and then you open up your phone app and you have control again. That's what it feels like within Quindar, is our manufacturers are able to take it, fix it, send it back, or during LEOP is get it all configured and then deliver it to the customer in a state they can start taking pictures. So it's like that level of flexibility that was built into Quindar, which is on top of the security and compliance that we have, that allows us to build the product and to remain ahead of the market.
Awesome, love it. And I guess the next I wanted to talk to you about is it's one of the motives of starting this podcast, really, is to speak to great leaders and co-founders like yourself to try and make space more accessible, more relatable to the wider audience. And I guess one of the concerns when I'm going to these shows, like we mentioned, Utah and DC and everything, space market is booming. I think it's fair to say that it's growing. It's fantastic to see. It's not really getting any easier to find the talent to sustain that growth. So I think one of the concerns is sooner or later we're probably going to run out of talent. Now, whether that be technical engineering talent, software, sales, whatever it is, we're going to come to that conclusion. So what could and should we be doing, in your opinion, at a grassroots level in the classrooms, STEM, to try and spread the message, make it more relatable, more accessible for more people to consider it as a career? And by the way, it doesn't have to be exclusively kids, young generation. I also think other industries too, people that are in automotive. I don't know about, I've only been doing this 6.5 years, but as soon as I say space to friends or family now, the immediate perception is astronauts, rocket scientists,
Yeah.
astrophysicists. So yeah.
Yeah, no, my family still thinks I'm a rocket scientist, and I'm like, I don't touch rockets. I don't
Yeah.
deal nearly as much as with
There
what
you
they
go.
do. So yeah, it definitely has that perception to it. I definitely think it's a generational thing, and I'll say it because with the advent of AI, with like the Chat GPT boom in 2022, is people realize how much more they can get done in a prompt than they could if by building the software that the prompt is providing them that information. And so it's becoming easier to do day-to-day activities. It's becoming easier to build websites. It's becoming easier to write software with Copilot. You can literally type in a comment with Copilot and say, make me a function that queries, how many satellites are in space today from SatCat. And so, like it'll start building out, reaching out to the API, figuring it out. Anyways, it's becoming easier to do all of that just through natural language querying. And what we would say here on this podcast of like, hey, we want to build, a mission operations company. There's a lot that we have to build. What do we need to do? And to start kind of prompting that out. Granted, that's not like a silver bullet. It's not like gonna make everything work, but it's gonna save some time. I'll say it's gonna save some time. What we're doing here at Quindar is democratizing access to space. You do not need to be a flight dynamics expert to work at Quindar. You don't need to know what a Kalman filter is, what Cartesian coordinates are, what orbit determination is. You don't need to know that. And we've said that as we're hiring too, is we're hiring software engineers. So if you're a software engineer, we are actively hiring. But you do not need to come from the space industry. And if you look on our website, yeah, there are people from the space industry, and it's amazing because we get a lot of great lessons learned and understanding. But we also have a lot of people who don't come from the space industry. And because to our customers, I give this challenge to our front end developers is, our user touch points are the API on the product side specifically, are the API and the UI. And a front-end developer should be able to fly a satellite. If we're building the right product, it should be so simplified that someone who's not an expert as a satellite operator, someone who's not a rocket scientist, can fly our satellite. Where I could go to my parents and see if it's intuitive. The future of Quindar really isn't creating all these screens. When you look at, what's in NASA, what's in mission operation centers, you always see like telemetry streaming and, the orbit of the satellite and stuff. That's great for show, but it literally doesn't do much of anything in the terms of how quickly can I recover from an anomaly. Like, yes, I look up at a screen, I see something's red. What am I going to do? It should blink red and turn green right away. That's what should happen. So you should see a little blip. That's what Quindar is building into the system is not only the automation, but the intelligence. Why are people sitting in front of the screen looking at it? And then why are they acting? What are they doing day to day, such as, am I in the right orbit? How when I need to maneuver, if I'm doing orbit raising, all the different conjunctions as you raise your altitude and change your orbital parameters, like you're getting different conjunctions. And so, the future of Quindar really is more of like a chat prompt because really you want to find specific information and understand that, such as, have I ever seen this anomaly on any other satellite? Like that's a conversation you have in a mission operations center. That's a prompt we're releasing it soon actually, is a chatbot where you can type these prompts in and get those responses. What's traditionally would be done is, okay, I'm going to go to this expert. This expert's going to go look through their data. It might not even be in a user interface. It's just like they have access to this data, access to these logs. They have, they're a black box. They only know how to do this. And then they're going to come back to me. They're the expert. I'm going to listen to them. And in a couple hours or a couple days, we're going to figure out what to do. You should just be asking the system. So again, you do not need to be an expert or find that expert to ask them. You just need to query the system. And so in the end, it should be as easy as writing into a chat prompt, which doesn't necessarily mean you need to be an expert to work mission operations, like in flight dynamics, mission planning, command and control. Quindar is doing all of that hard legwork to democratize access to space.
So you're your tech by function is making space more accessible. That's blown my mind a little bit, and it's made me ask a question that, going back to what you said a minute ago, and you see the big, command centers at NASA and all that kind of stuff. Do you think with this tech and the future of this tech and how it's going to develop and how it's going to materialize, do you think there will be less of a need for such large satellite operation teams and centers, because it will be a lot easier, as what you just said, prompt goes red goes green straight away?
Yeah, exactly. There is for human spaceflight, you need people on console. You're talking to a human. There's human life on the line, so there definitely are exceptions. For every satellite is a telecommunications satellite. I was told that once, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, this makes sense. Like, every satellite has a radio link. You need to talk to that satellite. You need to find information, and you need to download information. What it's doing beyond that is not necessarily what Quindar is focused on. We have partners that help with payload management and stuff like that. But those day in the life uptime operations do not require, again, with the exception of human spaceflight, do not require people in the room 24/7 with our software. That is a good analogy here is Netflix. Netflix has thousands of servers, thousands of servers. They have a handful, like I think maybe 5 people who manage all of that. There's a ton of automation. There's a ton of high availability. That team is managing the uptime so that, we can Netflix and chill on the weekends without interruptions. And so that's what we're doing, is making sure that we're always up and running, and you don't need people 24/7. Reduces the staffing that's required. It's much quicker because we can onboard people, within a couple days onto the platform. In one instance, in 23 days from ICD of, hey, this is how you talk to the satellite. In 23 days, Quindar was able to take shadow passes with a satellite. I've never seen any company, any team do it faster than that. So until I know that there is as a record, I think that is a record for 23 days to connect to someone like that. That would have taken a team to build in-house months to years, and not to have the quality or the uptime. So like, that is where it should be an easy decision to connect and to keep it up and running. And they weren't worried about, well, how do I fill a room with employees? How do I put my screens up there? They can get there, that's for sure. But it's more focused on, how do I keep the satellite up and running versus like, how do I staff a room? That's what we should be focused on.
Seems incredible. Mine's, but I'm just thinking of all the how that tech is going to materialize and how it's going to develop. It's going to change the entire face of the satellite operations industry.
Yeah, no, we should get you to fly a satellite, and that's when we know we built the right product. No offense.
Yeah, no, absolutely incredible. I love it. And go back to what you said a couple of minutes ago around those lessons learned along the way. I think going back to what we were talking about with the younger generation and things like social media, and they all see kind of like the highlight reel, right, of successes. They all see the end goal, the finish line of what people are doing. They never see the kind of the grit, the hustle behind the scenes it took to get there. So what would you say are the main lessons or failures, however you want to say it, learned along the way? And on the flip side of that coin, what would you say is your biggest achievement to date?
Yeah, I think in all startups, you need the ability and the culture to experiment and to learn. So like, that's another way of saying to fail, but failure is kind of excuse me, it's kind of an end state. So you need the ability to experiment and learn, and to be able to iterate. And so when it comes to that, some of the lessons learned that we've had is just in the sense of, making sure that the product that we're building, that customers want. And I'm not saying people don't want our customers. It's just, I think it's very rare for any company to only ever build the product that they envisioned on day one. And so this is, again, not a failure, because we're experimenting and learning. We're talking to users and building product. And so like, you have to not have horse blinders on when you're starting a company, because you're going to see signal, and you need to know when to lock on that signal.
Yeah.
You can see so many companies out there that didn't start as selling satellites, like the hardware folks, like the ones that make the headlines for, $100 million raises, and such. Some of these companies did not start off building satellites, and now they are building satellites. So there was market demand that they saw that said, this is the next step, and this is how we expand into it. There are some even harder pivots and stuff in space, whether it's from GNC software to flight software, or from, rockets and missiles, rocket companies that are turning into like more missile companies and working solely in defense and stuff. So it's always talk to users, build product, listen to the market, look back. You probably have evolved. Like that's definitely one of the lessons that I think is just important in every single company that's started. The other one is just this is a very, very difficult product to make. Like
Yeah.
I do think that the 6 founders are rare, if not unique, because there's companies that take just a slice of the product, like only the flight dynamics, only the mission planning, only the command and control, and the company is dedicated solely to that. That's how hard of a problem it is. That's how many people are needed to focus and build on that. And we're doing full stack.
Yeah.
We're building, not only we're building for on cloud, we're now building for on-prem. We're building the flight dynamics, the mission planning, the command and control, the missing link, which is event management. What do you do when something goes wrong? How do you take that blip on the screen and make it a blip, so that if something goes wrong, something goes right away?
Yeah.
So that event management is so important as well. So it's a lot. It's a big product. There's a lot to test, and cybersecurity, quality, and testing and stuff for many other companies take a back seat because it's like, hey, we just need to push product, push product, push product. At the end of the line, we're managing $20 million satellites. Our customers are using our software to manage $20 million satellites. On the government side, we're talking like close to $1 billion satellites. And so when I say they're flying servers in space, we still have to test. Servers on the ground are worth like, a couple $1,000s each and stuff. So if something goes wrong, you can go and fix it, buy another one. You can't do that in space. And so there is a level of quality that we must adhere to, for our customers because of they can't get their asset back. It's very expensive. That's why we provide the SLA. That's why that's our culture is built on security and compliance. And that's why we have a testing team as well to make sure that we're not releasing any bugs into the system that could turn off operations for a bit.
Awesome. Incredible. And I guess on the advice side as well, for people that are listening to this and want to get into the space sector, is there, I guess, along your journey in transitioning into the space sector, even now, like building a business, are there any particular resources that you identified along the way that helped you with your growth? Maybe it's courses, mentors, or something like that kind of helped you transition into the space sector that other people could take advantage of today?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is just being curious. So I used Udemy a lot in my previous job just to learn cloud. I was like, no one's going to teach me cloud. No one here knows cloud. So
Yeah.
I'm going to use like Udemy courses. I thought they were amazing and stuff. And there's just a humongous library of courses that you can take on there. But a lot of that started just with being curious and knowing that no one's going to teach me. I'm going to have to teach myself. And I know like so many other of our team members are the exact same way. And we have an amazing, diverse group of teammates right now that can help, teach or guide or point people to the right resources. So that's been awesome. Code Academy was before that. Like I was using Code Academy a lot just to learn like how do I actually write software, and it's very interactive and stuff. So you don't need to necessarily sign up for a university class in order to learn how to write software. You don't need to sign up for a university class or get a degree in order to learn cloud infrastructure and platform. And with the advent of AI, you can literally just ask AI, maybe what are the best resources to learn something you want. It's almost turns into the Matrix, at least in the sense where you can ask the Matrix.
Yeah.
It's not going to download it into your brain yet, but maybe we'll get there one day.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the best resources. But then like the people in the industry and stuff have been just amazing. Like the aerospace industry, I often say it's like the golf community. No one is like rooting against each other. Like you watch golf and whoever's in the lead, like everyone's just rooting for that person. They're not like rooting against that person and stuff. And that's like the aerospace community is everyone's rooting for each other, trying to help each other out. It's a really small industry, and everyone wants to be a resource if they possibly can. And so using the industry, if you have a friend in the industry, reaching out to them, like if you reach out to me, like I'm happy to talk, especially to help that next generation and pay it forward.
I couldn't have put it better. So someone said what you've just said. You've put it amazing with the golf analogy. I mentioned this to someone about 3 episodes ago, and I feel that way too. Like when I go to events and stuff, it's weird because you be in other industries throughout your career and everyone's kind of so competitive with each other, trying to get one up on each other. But there is no, from what I've seen, everybody collaborates, everybody wants to see each other win. Everyone's got the same collective end goal in mind. And there's no cloak and dagger at all.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
complete transparency. And yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And on the other side, I guess the final question today before we wrap things up here is, with all of your experience and everything that you've learned from the early days from Lockheed up until now, if you could kind of distill all of that information, all that data, all the things you've learned down to like one piece of advice for that person that we've kind of been talking about throughout this podcast that looks at space and does still think it is all rocket scientists and it's beyond their reach, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to that person wanting to get into the space sector?
Yeah, it comes from one of my early managers. I was in my, that's probably early 20s, definitely when I started off. And he was like mentioning that there's, phases of life. I've definitely changed phases of life. Like the first phase of life is about you. Like I was single at the time, didn't even have a car, didn't own any property. Literally, I think I moved with like 2 boxes, came from my dorm room. So easy to move around. Didn't have any money, but like very easy to move around. He's like, right now, everything is about you and what you can do for yourself. Then there's gonna be a time when you'll have a partner, and it's gonna become us, you and them. And then, so I had that, and then, a family, and then it's gonna become them. Like everything that you do is gonna be focused on like what's for the best of my family and stuff. Then when your kids grow up and they graduate or, go into college, graduate high school, go into college and stuff, it's finally going to be you and your partner again. So there will never be another time where it's just you. And you're like, the only person that you have to be loyal to is yourself. No one's going to care more about what you need in life than yourself. I will definitely provide opportunities for our employees, internal, and, if they are, and what I can do within the industry, as we kind of talked about here, to make sure that people can, decide what's best for them and stuff. And at Quindar, we're very, very transparent. All hands, you see how much money's in the bank account, you see runway, you see net burn, because you know what's best for yourself. And we're doing very successful right now, but you know what's best for yourself. And so kind of going all back to that is, especially for early folks in their career and stuff, is focus on yourself if you can. And the only person that you have to be loyal to is yourself, because no one cares more about you than you. No one knows about your personal interests as much as you do. So if you have that inner voice, listen to it.
Amen. Fantastic. Do you know what? I feel like I could do an entire podcast episode. Just the common theme here when I ask this question to guests is mentors. And it seems like there is, similar to what you've just said there with the different phases of life, you have different mentors for different seasons of your life as well. I think, again, I feel like I'm picking on the younger generation, but I think people maybe don't know where to start in finding a mentor, for that part of their life. So I feel like I could do like an entire segment just on how do you actually go about finding the right mentor for you and that season of your life and your development.
Yeah, and I think it's just getting yourself out there. If you're sitting, and that's the maybe dangerous part about like AI and software and stuff, is it's so easy to sit behind a computer, and not get out there. But social skills are very important. Even if you don't have social skills, like you're going to see people who will gravitate towards you and stuff, and strike up a conversation. We say this all the time whenever we're going to conferences and stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe this is our last year here. Like, is this actually going to be worth it? And it's that like one random conversation, whether it's on a bus, whether it's at a table, a networking event, whatever it is. It's like you just have to be present. And so I think like that's for finding a mentor, even like, don't be afraid to post on LinkedIn, don't be afraid to reach out, because like the worst anyone can say, honestly, is not even no, it's just like not even responding. But like rejection comes throughout life. Rejection happens all the time in sales. Rejection happens in relationships. Rejection happens, probably every single day of your life. But just being present, I think, is the first thing, and having patience too. Like I have a brother-in-law and stuff who's in college right now. Is like, yeah, I've been in your spot, trying to find that job. There's so many tech layoffs going on right now. Like, little marketing, Quindar is hiring. But with all of that, it's just having patience, because it will come. It will come if you're patient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't actually plan this question, but just listening to you, I was just keen to hear your thoughts on this, because one thing I've kind of got from this conversation is that you guys at Quindar seem to have a skill for, you've mentioned it a couple of times this episode, picking up signals and iterating to improve your system and your software to the market. Those signals that you guys clearly pick up on very quickly, iterate and get in the market to improve your product. Where does that skill come from? How do you, is that just you and the founders? Is that just your ingenuity? You're just your gut and think we need to do this? Are you constantly asking clients for that feedback loop? Like, how do you spot those signals and go, right, okay, let's improve it and get it back out there?
I think it depends per person, honestly. Like
Yeah.
some folks are good with the data. So if they
Yeah.
have the data, if it's written down, if it's aggregated from different sources, and then kind of like a word chart, it's like that one is a bit bolder and a bit bigger because I've heard that, like then
Yeah.
they're able to see that signal. Me personally, honestly, it's like I'm always I always remember the little things, the small things and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so it's like it's always in the back of my head when someone says, "Hey, I'm using like this command and control system, this flight software system, working with this manufacturer, working with this customer," and it's there's a Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme and stuff where Charlie is like putting together all the red ropes or red strings and stuff,
Yeah.
and it all is like we'll follow the trail. Like that's kind of like what works in my head best, and stuff. And for others, it's just gut. It's literally just gut, and it's like,
Yeah.
hey, let's take action here, and if it doesn't work out, like that's fine. Like that's we'll pivot or persevere. And I think one of the most important things too, like in a startup, is understanding that the biggest constant is change. Like
Yes.
you will always change. Your team will change. Your product will change. The amount of money you have will change. It's always changing. And what you did last year will not work for this year. If you're trying to go from a seed company to a Series 8 company, you've just found product market fit. Now you have to grow. You have different stakes on the line. If you're trying to go from Series A to Series B, starting to focus more on margin and stuff, and
Yeah.
how do you scale and stuff, you have, how do you reduce implementation time? How do you make sure that your LTV to CAC ratio, is of the right margins and stuff? And so it's always just knowing that like what we're doing today, though, I'm gonna have to do something different next year. And we're already planning for next year. We're already planning for 2027. And so it
Yeah.
takes kind of like that set of skills, the data people, the gut people, the people who have, lock boxes for minds, and the folks that are strategic looking at a couple years from now, but then also the tactical people in the field that are bringing back that feedback at the edge, talking to customers, saying this is their pain, seeing them click one too many times, and you can
Yeah.
pick that up
Yeah.
in some interviews and stuff like that, and have that diverse team.
Yeah. Find comfort in the chaos and sweat the small stuff.
Yes, because the other piece of advice that I got is it's not getting any easier. It will never
Yeah.
get easier. So
Yeah.
never think that there's like that light at the end of the tunnel that you can just kind of sit back on a beach, I guess, and that's what the light's from. It's not. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
another train coming along the way.
Love it. Amazing. Nate, thank you so much. Thanks for joining the show today. I feel like I could talk to you all day. I want to be respectful of your time, but this has been an incredible episode. Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today, and hopefully see you on the event circuit.
Yeah, no, for sure. We'll definitely talk more on the event circuit. Thanks for having me, Richard.
All right. Thanks, Nate. Take care.
Yeah, awesome.
Cheers. Bye.